Today we have a Kia Picanto. It's a 2012 model, fitted with the 1.2 petrol engine, and it's got roughly 53,000 miles on the clock. So the customer's brought the car in today complaining that after he's done a few miles and gets out of the car, there's a bit of a smell from the rear brake area, and he did say when he was driving it you got a little bit of a squeak. So we're just going to have a look today and see what we find. But before I get too involved and loosen the wheel nuts, take the wheels off, I've got it lifted up off the ground. I just want to make sure that they both spin freely. That one does. I'll pop round the other side and give that one a little try. There's a bit more resistance there, so that might be something. But I think we'll crack the wheel bolts loose next and lift it up to a working height and have a look. So before I start dismantling anything, as we're going to be working on the braking system, I'm going to take the cap off the reservoir because I think we're going to end up having to take the calipers off and push the pistons back in anyway. And when you do that, you push the piston in and that forces the fluid back up through the system into the bottle. You might find that it'd overflow, though looking at the space in here, I'm sure it won't. If it does overflow, make sure you've got some fresh water, maybe a soft cloth, just to mop it up with, because it does make a brilliant paint stripper, so you don't want to be dripping that everywhere. Before the customer left, I asked about the locking wheel nut key because people tend to hide them in all different places. So that's just one thing to be mindful of. You can spend ages looking for these. Locking wheel nut key. Hopefully it's the right one for the car. Oh yeah, there it goes. So I've dropped it back down on the ground now, just so I can crack these loose. Right, I'll go around and do exactly the same on the other side, and then we'll lift it up. Ready to catch the wheel in case it falls off, but if this side's anything like the other side I've just removed, it was stuck on there. Oh, there you go. Bit of corrosion in the middle there. I'll probably get a wire brush on that and just clean it up there in the middle of the hub. Put a little bit of grease on that before rebuilding it anyway. So looking at this initially, I have just pumped the brake pedal and this is a little bit tighter now, so it does show that the foot brake isn't releasing fully. Got the handbrake cable here, so when you operate the handbrake, the cable pulls the lever this way and then you let go and it comes back onto a stop, which is here. That's the stop there, and you can see it is returning to the stop. I can operate the handbrake quickly, so hopefully you can see what I mean. That's on and off, on and off. So hopefully you can see that that is releasing fully. If the cable was frayed or damaged and causing the handbrake to stay on, it wouldn't return fully to the stop. So we're doing these same checks on both sides. That appears to be fine. I think the next stage is to remove the caliper, check these two sliders, make sure the pads are moving freely, and check the piston in the caliper. Right, I've got a 14mm single hex socket here. You can use a spanner, it's just the single hex. You get a better purchase on the bolts or the nuts, whatever you're undoing, and reduces the chance of slipping. And you've got a 17mm here on the slider, just to hold that still if it starts turning. I'll crack the bottom one loose as well, which is exactly the same as the top. That's it. I'm going to use a screwdriver just to wriggle this caliper off. That's one of the clips come off there. So these clips are just used to help release the brake pads from the disc when you take the pressure off the pedal. Sort of pushes them out a little bit. Put that down for now. So the sliders, you want to make sure they're free and they move easily, that's good. Brake pads, that could be the issue, that one's a bit tight. Yeah, that's stuck in there. Should be able to move them quite easily. Cool, they do smell burnt. I think that clip, yeah, they just pull out. You can see they've been hot just by the colour of the rust that's come off the disc onto them. Compared with the other side, it's a lot redder. That is tight in there. Next we'll have a look at this piston. So I've pumped the brake pedal a couple of times just to get the piston to come out a bit, just so we can have a look underneath this rubber boot. There, and as you can see, that looks pretty rusty under there. That should be highly polished, clean chrome surface. So I think we may have a bit of an issue with the caliper there, as well as the pads sticking in the carrier. I'm going to go ahead and do the same with the other side. Having spoken to the customer, they've given us the go-ahead to replace the pads, discs and the caliper. So I'm going to start by clamping this flexi hose. You can get specific rubber hose clamps, although I'll find just a pair of mole grips with some rubber tubing on there works just as well. That's it. And we've got a 12mm banjo fitment there for the pipe. Should be a copper washer either side of this pipe, which hopefully the new caliper will come with a couple of new ones. Yeah, so there's one on there. I'll leave that in there. And one stuck to the caliper. Actually, I will take that out in case it drops out. Right, so I think I'll see if I can get this cable off next. Looks like a horseshoe shaped clip there. It should just slide out. That's it. Then we need to unhook it off the end of this arm, which could be a little bit tricky. Not too sure how I'm going to go about that just yet. Sometimes you can operate the arm and Put it out. I'd like to be able to pull this rubber boot off so I can put something on the cable and put it, but take that spring off might make it a bit easier. Oh yeah, that's made life easier. One old caliper, which will need to be returned in exchange for the new one, in most cases. I'll put that in the vise and do that. That's it. So that can wait over here for the new one to arrive. So the next thing I want to do is take the caliper carrier off so we can give it a good clean and remove the disc. That's held on by two 14mm head size bolts around the back here. Okay, so that's off. We'll transfer that to the vise and give it a clean up next. Right, so I'll start by just giving these anti-rattle shims a bit of a dust off while they're still in place. And next we'll pop them off of there. Sometimes, well yeah, there's a bit in there, you get a build-up of corrosion in here, which reduces the gap for the brake pads to sit in. So then they become a little bit pinched and restricted and don't move freely and can cause the brake to stick on. Same symptoms as a seized caliper. So a good idea to just pull these bits off and give them a bit of a dust off. Now, I generally use a file. I'm not looking to take any thickness off the metal, but it's just a good tool to quickly remove any surface rust. Don't have to go too mad with it. And then back to the wire brush. Pop that back on. Then exactly the same down the bottom here. Lovely. The sliders are both free, so that's good. It's ready for reassembling. But we'll get the brake disc off next. Right, with this brake disc, we've got one grub screw there to come out. And as you can see, it's quite corroded. The disc is scrap, so I'm just going to give it a bit of a hammering to hopefully crack that loose. Don't really want to round it out. But also don't want to be hitting these wheel studs. Oh, yeah. One grub screw. And one old brake disc. So before rebuilding, I want to try and get rid of some of this corrosion. If you remember, the wheel was very tight to remove. And it's also a good idea to make sure this surface is clean, hasn't got any debris on there, so that the disc mounts flat against it. So just generally give it a going over with a wire brush. That looks a bit better. Also do the centre of the wheel hub as well next. So quite a bit of dust coming out of there, aluminium corrosion. Grab a bit of copper grease to go in there. hopefully that won't get stuck again. Right, so we've got the new parts for the vehicle now. New brake disc here. As you might be able to see, it's quite shiny and wet with, it's just like an oily residue that they put on to stop it corroding while it's in the packaging. So I'm just going to use a bit of brake cleaner, wipe that off on the friction surfaces. Then we'll get this screw back on. That's it. It's not even a screw hole in the hub for that one. So it's just the one screw. Next we'll get the caliper carrier on. So this is all cleaned up and ready to go on. Sorted that out earlier. There's the two fitting bolts. So you've just got two lugs behind here that they slide through. Right, they're nice and tight. Next we'll get the pads in there. So the brake pads, I don't know if you can see there, you've got two little lumps sticking out there and one on here. The one with one little lump there protruding actually locates in the piston of the caliper. It's also got this little metal part on here, which is, it acts like a brake pad wear warning. As soon as the lining gets down really low, that rubs on the disc and makes a horrendous screeching noise, so you know you need to get the brakes looked at. And it's supposed to do that before the actual pad completely wears out and it goes metal to metal, destroying the disc. So it gives you a little bit of warning. Before we fit these, I'm going to pop a bit of copper grease on the ears of the pads. Just helps to prevent them from sticking in the little shims, the anti-rattle shims. So I think you can see they do move in there. They're not as tight as the old ones were. So like most things, depending on what brand you go for, the prices can vary quite a lot. These aftermarket ones, you'd probably pick up for around about £30–35 for the set, which is a lot cheaper than genuine ones where you could probably pay more than double. Brake discs, again, around about £35 to £40 each for the aftermarket ones. Next I'll grab the caliper and we'll get that hung on there. So here's our new caliper, and that's the little slot that the brake pad locates in. So you've got to make sure that that's kind of at the 6 o'clock position when you're winding the pistons in. New caliper already comes with it in the right position. We've got 2 copper washers to replace these old ones on the banjo fitting for the pipe. So let's get this caliper. There's one thing which I had forgot to do, which are these little clips that locate in the brake pads. That's it. So these calipers, surprisingly expensive for a small car. This had a recommended retail value of £200 plus VAT. Not quite sure where they get that price from. I think that's probably a main dealer price. The aftermarket one you should be able to get for around about 150, including the VAT. Obviously depending on what brand you go for and where you shop. All you need to do is make sure you've got your registration number handy, and whoever you use will be able to recommend the correct price, the correct parts for your vehicle. And they normally give you a range of different brands to choose from. I don't tend to ever go for the cheapest ones. I try and get a sort of mid-range brand, which are generally names that you would recognise anyway. Right, that's the 214s done up. I'm not going to put the handbrake cable on yet. I'll lay it in place, but when you fit a new caliper, there's often a little note inside the box that says don't move the handbrake arm before you've refitted the caliper and pumped the pedal so the piston's out and in place, pressing against the pads, and then you fit the cable. I think it kind of messes up the setting from new inside if you pull it now. So we'll leave that until last. And what am I doing? Can't really see. There we go. Pull that plug out. That's where the brake pipe goes. So this is the banjo fitting bolt. We give this a little blast off with some brake cleaner. Looks a bit mucky. So we want one washer on there. And the other one goes on there, on the underside. And you've got this little peg that locates in the hole there. Helps to keep the brake pipe in the correct position, especially when you're nipping it up as well, stops it twisting. That's it. Right, so we're at the stage now where we can release these grips, pipe clamp, and take the rubber cover off of the bleed nipple and crack that loose. It's a 10mm. that bleed nipple. So you probably won't see anything for a while. I'm going to just leave that to let it do its own thing and trickle out by itself. I prefer to do that rather than pressing the brake pedal to extremities where it doesn't usually go right to the floor. And you know, occasionally on the older cars you can end up damaging the master cylinder seals. Right, so this has been dripping away for a couple of minutes now. Obviously make sure you've got enough brake fluid in the reservoir. If it doesn't start dripping by itself, which this one actually didn't, I just tapped the brake pedal gently. I didn't push it down, just probably about a centimetre or two, and that got things moving. So I'm going to lock it off there. Obviously make sure you've got something on the floor underneath to catch the drips. You can put a piece of pipe on there, like a windscreen washer pipe or tubing is a perfect fit for there, and direct it into a bottle. But that seems to work perfectly fine for me, as long as you clean up afterwards. Right, so I'm going to go and pump the brake pedal now. And I just want to make sure that the piston comes out and touches the brake pad squarely. The little peg that sticks out locates in the piston, and if it doesn't, then the piston won't touch the pad. It'll butt up against that peg. Just climb in and do this. That's it, we've got a good solid pedal, so I don't think there's any air left in the system. Yeah, and I can see that the piston there is touching the brake pad, so the pin has located in the little slot. Otherwise it would have butted up against the pin and there would have been a gap there of about 3 or 4 mil. But that looks good. I'll double check the other side as well. As long as that's okay, we'll get the handbrake cable back on next. Right, I'll put this horseshoe shaped clip back in here. That's it. Now this is going to be quite tough, so I think what I'll do is disconnect the spring on the back there again. Hopefully that'll help release some of the tension there. Yeah, it's a bit awkward to do as well as filming. Oh, that's it, brilliant. So that's the handbrake cable back in. Still spinning freely. I'll go and operate the handbrake. Oh no, I've got to put the spring back on. hopefully you'll see the arm moving and returning as it should do. So that's on and off. So with it on, shouldn't be able to turn the disc now. No. Let's release it. That one spins freely. And so does that one. Brilliant. I'll pop that cover back on the bleed nipple. And I think we can go ahead and get the wheel back on next. Right, I've double checked everything and I'm happy that it's all tight, fitted as it should be. There, the wheel is a nice fit now. It's definitely worth making sure it doesn't get seized on again, giving that corrosion a clean off and a bit of grease, because the last thing you want is get a puncture somewhere, and trying to get that off at the side of the road won't be much fun. Right, I'll just gently nip these up. Then we'll double check it on the floor. Right, back on the floor again now. As with all fixings on the car, nuts and bolts, you can look up and find a tightening torque, and if you've got a torque wrench to hand, then that's great. Go ahead and use that. You just got to be sensible, really, and not go too mad. Especially with the locking wheel nut, you don't want to shear that off. I would guess wheel nuts to be around about 120 Newton metre mark. But like I say, just be sensible about it. Okay. So we're back down on the ground now. I have already pumped the pedal while it was up in the air, but I'll give that another pump just to make sure. Yeah, that's good. Handbrake feels good. So earlier we removed the reservoir cap. I can see that's down a fraction, the fluid, so I will top that up to the maximum. Make sure you use brake fluid that hasn't been stood around on the shelf for years, because it can absorb moisture. And you don't want that in your braking system. That will definitely make the pedal spongy. So that's one of the most important things, really. Make sure you pump the pedal and you get a good firm pedal after you've had the brakes apart. But that's it, just about done under here now. Well, that's the job done. I'm quite happy with how it went. All that's left to do, like I do with any job, take it out for a road test, make sure your brake pedal feels normal, but remembering that the brakes possibly won't be as sharp as they used to be until the pads and discs have bedded in, which can take, you know, probably 3 or 4 days of normal driving. After the road test, I'm going to bring it back in here anyway and lift the wheels off the floor, make sure the wheels are still spinning freely, and double check the brake caliper, make sure there's no leaks. Well, thanks for watching. Hopefully the video's been of some help for you, and if it has, please consider hitting like and subscribe. It will help our channel out no end. Cheers.